Hello, this is Justin Ruger with Accessible Beekeeping and more. Today we have our guest, James Anderson. How are you doing today?
I'm very well. How are you, Justin?
So I wanted to start by asking, what is your disability and how long have you been keeping bees?
Okay, so I've got cerebral palsy that affects the left-hand side of my body, all of it. I had a stroke when I was 11, so I've just had to adapt, like we both have, really, I suppose. To make the best of the situations we've got. I've been a beekeeper now for nearly a year. I've just started my second year, so I started keeping bees probably April last year. So I've got through my first winter successfully, which is good. And I'm just over here in the UK. We're just getting into the start of spring, so things are starting to pick up momentum.
Yeah, we're starting to get into the swing of things here too. People are starting to get their swarm traps out. And do you use a walker or wheelchair, or are you able to walk normally?
I'm able to walk pretty normally. When I first had my stroke, like a lot of things, when you do, your mobility is massively affected. So I've had to learn again as best I can. And then you reach a plateau where you generally speaking, you can only achieve so much physically. So yeah, I used a walker and a wheelchair to start with many years ago, but I'm relatively mobile.
And do you have balance issues?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I'm not afraid to admit it. I think with a lot of disabilities, probably cerebral palsy, um, I can relate to more. That you find your balance is affected of how tired you are, and how kind of a good day you've had. Maybe if you had a good day, you tend to go through it more easily. Whereas if you're having a bad day, it becomes more of a challenge. And I think it becomes a bit more of a vicious circle where you're fighting your tiredness and then you're fighting your ability to do things, and it just compounds it.
How many hives do you have currently?
I have got, let me think here. I've got four. I've got a mixture of type of hives. So I've got long hives, national hives, and trying to think, and one that's made out of a beer barrel.
Out of a what?
Out of a beer barrel, like a beer keg.
Oh wow.
I'll have to send you
How
some
does
bits of it.
how do the bees like that?
It's pretty good. It's like one of these oak barrels, like the old whiskey barrels.
Yeah.
Um, so they really enjoy it. It's um, it'd be better if I had some pictures to show, really, which I'll send you. But basically, they draw the comb out on little wax starter strips on the frames, a bit like a top bar hive.
Yeah.
So they really, really enjoy it. But like anything with bees, once you get a good, strong colony in a hive, it's not just making sure how much room they've got; it's making sure that the hive is ventilated enough so they don't end up bearding all the time out of it in the good weather.
And so you don't use Langstroth, or you do?
No, I as much as I'd like Langstroth, it's the physical size of the frames that kind of puts me off a little bit because um, I suppose I would say probably if Langstroth was more manageable, I'd look at using that because I like the idea of having you can either have the frame with a starter strip or have it fully waxed sheet inside it and so on. But it's just such a large frame, I feel. And for maneuverability, when you're rotating the frame around and up and down, let alone when you're standing, for somebody that's in a wheelchair, I'd imagine that's a pretty big challenge, really.
Yeah, and I can imagine how somebody who's got a left side deficit could also have trouble rotating that size of a frame around.
Yeah, I mean, I love. I mean, it would be nice to have big frames in a lot of hives, but it's also as well if you get a beehive that's honey bound, and you've got, I've had it with a few hives where you've got a 14 by 12 frame that's full of honey that must weigh 3 or 4 kilos, maybe 10 pounds or more.
So, is there anything that you have done special that has helped you overcome some limitations?
Um, it's difficult to say really because I suppose my disability is relatively mild compared to a lot of disabled beekeepers. So for me, I guess I find that um, having things, I suppose, organized probably a bit more in advance before I do things compared to other people who can just pick up their equipment and go down to the apiary and go and see their bees. Whereas with me, I find the challenge is probably more psychological. It's thinking, okay, well, I know the bees are fine. I did an inspection last week, etc. I'd love to go and see the bees today, but am I in a good physical state and mentally to go down there without making any silly mistakes? Um, so I suppose for me, there's not many physical adaptations, but mentally, I suppose it's taught me to look at myself objectively and look at, am I having a good day? Am I having a bad day? You know, I mean, I love to go and see and watch the bees kind of like socially as opposed to working with them in between inspections. But there's some days when, you just wake up and think, oh, I'd like to do this. And then halfway through the day, you realize, well, my body's not quite up to it. So I suppose planning in advance helps a lot.
And making sure you're not too tired.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I tend to do a lot anyway. We've got 3 dogs and we go out dog walking and stuff. And yeah, even that can have an impact the following day.
Do you believe that your disability makes it harder for you to be successful as a beekeeper, or do you find that you have managed working with it to be successful, that it's not so much as a struggle as it could be?
That's a really good question. I suppose it's difficult to say. I mean, I think obviously only speaking on my own experiences, I've had to give it a lot more planning. I've had to, um, well, I can't really come back to anything else, but I've had to give it a lot of planning in the sense of planning in advance. I'm very OCD, so when I start a hobby or an interest, I like to give it my all, which can be like massively detrimental in the sense that I become besotted with it. Um, I mean, I've got like, yeah, I didn't think 12 months ago that I'd end up with 4 beehives, 3 spare beehives, 8 poly nukes, and a whole shed of equipment already. And I've not even done my first year of beekeeping, if it completed 12 months of beekeeping. So um, I suppose just for me personally, I think it's probably helped me be a better beekeeper because you have to take your time. You can only do things as quick as it allows you to do. Your disability allows you to do things. And there's been days when I wanted to inspect all my hives and then done like 2 out of 3 and find out I'm exhausted and come back the next day.
So is that what you try to do? Do you try to go into all your hives when you do an inspection, or do you schedule them out like one a day or two a day?
Um, well, this year maybe I might do things a little bit differently. But generally speaking, historically, last autumn I was inspecting all the hives the same day because they were back then we'd only started with 2 colonies and had to split them. So we had 2 full-size hives and 2 nukes, and obviously, as you know, to inspect a nuke's relatively straightforward. Um, but it's still an inspection. So generally, I was inspecting all 4 at the same time. But I have my wonderful stepdaughter, who's a beekeeper as well, who goes with me, um, who assists with the finer movements I struggle doing with. Like doing for example, moving frames that are too heavy or moving something that's inaccessible. Um, but more often than not, she's there because she enjoys it as well. So
Yeah, that was my next question. I was wondering if you did anything, if you had a partner that worked with you, and how much work they did.
yeah, I mean, my daughter Sophie, she's been a beekeeper now for about 6 months, and she's very much interested in continuing it. Now with us coming out just like where you are, coming out of the end of the winter into spring, she's getting to see, as am I, the whole start of the season, which I missed last year because I started just after it did. So she helps me with inspections. She helps me give me a second opinion. And I'll probably say one of the most valuable things is she gives me a second opinion about, yes, I think you're too tired. I think you've done more than enough today. You know, when your brain's thinking, I can still do this, and your body's going, I'm absolutely ruined.
Yeah, it's important to take a break when you're ready to take a break.
Definitely.
Do you find the mental aspect of beekeeping to be more taxing than the physical aspect?
Um, I would say the physical aspect's more taxing than the mental. The mental side of it I really enjoy because it's, for me, I find it like planning, preparation, organizing, because once you get into keeping bees, it's all about, okay, I did an inspection how many days ago. I know there was 4 queen cells down, and am I gonna, take one of those queen cells off and make a split and stuff like that? So that kind of thing I think is brilliant because it really keeps you on your toes mentally. And I mean, I use a diary as well for all the really important things, and I find it incredibly useful and helpful that the life cycle of the bees are so structured that it's almost like a clock. You can time it very well, and you can use that to your advantage. So I find the physical side more hard work than the mental, really.
I know when I started having, or when I had my TBI, my stroke, I struggled with depression and anxiety, and that the bees helped me. Is that something that you struggled with coming to terms with your disability, and then have the bees helped you find peace?
Yeah, I mean that's a great thing to ask. I mean, I can certainly relate to that. I find the beekeeping so therapeutic because you can't rush keeping bees. If you do that, you end up with angry bees, and no one likes angry bees. So yeah, I find it incredibly calming. I mean, I went down to the apiary today just for a cup of coffee and sat there and took a little video of them and just sat there watched them 20 minutes. It's a great mood lifter. Even the smell of bees, it gives me an endorphin rush. Of just it's just a great relaxing thing. I mean, had my stroke many years ago, about 30 plus years ago, but I do suffer with anxiety. I don't deny that, and I find it a great calming aspect because you've got the whole. Once you get into beekeeping, if you're not, and this is a generalization, so once you start getting into beekeeping, you then realize it's not just about the bees, it's about the whole ecosystem that the bees are part of and how you can play your part in it. So I find it incredible. It's like the last few weeks I've been going out for dog walks with my daughter and saying, "Oh, look at that wonderful forage! Look at those wonderful plants. The bees like this, and this." You start becoming you think outside the box so much more than just that little box of bees. I think it's brilliant for your well-being.
I appreciate you coming on the YouTube channel. It's really good to hear from people in a different world, basically. I mean,
Yeah.
from the United States. What do you have to tell somebody who is just getting into beekeeping that has a disability and is starting to feel overwhelmed?
I suppose the best piece of advice I can give anyone in that situation with, disability and feeling overwhelmed and out of their depth is if you've not already done so, join your local club or society. Um, Reach out. I mean, the power of social media is amazing. I mean, it's what brought us together. This very conversation. So,
Yes.
um, that if you're able to use social media, um, you can probably get in contact with your local beekeeping club quicker that way by finding them on Facebook, Instagram, or whatever, or even email. If not, check out your local um, I suppose just same in the States as the UK, you've got to join a certain beekeeping club in the UK. It's the British Beekeepers Association. You'll have something similar in the States, and you should be able to contact them to find out where your nearest local club is. You may even find adverts in it, like we do over here. Find adverts in local papers saying people selling honey. As a worst case scenario, I suppose you contact them. But I suppose if you're filling out of your depth, you kind of want to try and work out what's making you fill out your depth. Is it lack of knowledge? Is it the fact that you've got no time to do things? Is it the fact that you don't know how to plan things, or maybe you've been even gifted some beehives, which happens quite a lot when people retire. They give their bees something to look after, and suddenly you've got 4 or 5 colonies that may be needing a massive amount of work, and you're over your depth. So I suppose best piece of advice I can give, and as you can tell, I can talk for ages, I would say, is to contact your local beekeeping club, or use the power of social media to find a point of contact. At the very least, somebody should be able to point you in the right direction.
Basically, find a mentor.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got 2. I find them incredibly useful. I have one that's very much geared towards the beehive side of things, and building beehives. I've got a wonderful mentor who I'm actually going to see tomorrow, who is very much more bee focused, and we're actually going to go look at. There's a swarm in somebody's building in a village near where he lives, so we're looking to go and check that out tomorrow and see kind of what work needs to be done. So that'll be interesting, and I'll hopefully keep you updated on that.
There are a few, how do I put this? There are a few adaptive hardwares out there. I know Lyson just made an extractor that tilts. But there aren't very many. If you looked at your looked at your apiary and said, "This is something that could help me," what kind of hardware would you use? What would you be interested in somebody designing or fabricating that could help you and your disability?
Um, I've already got one piece of equipment which works really well, and you've probably seen them in the States, where you can buy an adjustable beehive stand that has adjustable legs. I've got one over here that you put like 2x4 wood in lengthways, and it'll hold like 3 or 4 hives. You can raise and lower the legs. That's brilliant because for me, I can get as close to my hive as I want, but also if you're a wheelchair user, you can get your foot plates under the stand and as close to the back of the beehive as you want, depending on things. But with regards to stuff that isn't available that we would need as disabled beekeepers, the hive's always the problem because it's the weight of things, and that's dictated by the bees. So we can kind of rule that out. I mean, poly nukes are really good. Poly hives are great. There are variations. I'm sure you're aware of this because we're both on the internet a lot. There's lots of variations of like almost like micro beehives, like apodea size hives, which are great to move things around, but obviously that's on a much smaller scale. So I suppose that's something I have to give some thought, really, because there's a few big beekeeping equipment manufacturers in the UK, and they do sell, for example, a wide variety of hive tools. I've got some that are quite big, some that are quite small, depending on what I need to do that day. Trying to think, really. It's difficult, really. I mean, I suppose it goes more towards, for a beekeeper, more towards the processing side of things. You mentioned having an extractor that you can tilt, that you can use. I mean, there's lots of motorized extractors out there, but generally the motorized ones are absolutely huge. And it's having the ability, I've been I have to have a look on the internet and find it to see how accessible it is. I suppose once you start going down equipment on an extracting scale, I suppose it's looking at what you need, and I suppose you're looking at stuff like uncapping machines, and if you need that much help with it, I follow, I don't know if you've seen him on YouTube, Justin, Jeff Horchef. He's absolutely awesome. He works, I think he's actually trained to be a monk. I know he works in a monastery, and they've got a lot of large equipment on an industrial scale. So I suppose it kind of depends from a disabled beekeeper's point of view what size of apiary you've got and what equipment you're looking at, because you can make your own adaptations to certain things, such as hive tool. You can get smaller ones, etc. You can make changes to your accessibility around your apiary, but it's the processing side of thing I think is going to be a stumbling block, depending on how far down the rabbit hole you're going to go with the bees, really. Because you can do certain things at home to a point and use your own adaptations as we do in our own daily lives. But the problem is, if you start looking at, I've got like 10, 15 hives, then you're either going to have to be using somebody else's extracting equipment or investing in it yourself. From the UK side of things, we've got a couple of distributors that import license equipment. Unfortunately, it's not cheap, but I'm not aware of anything that's particularly wheelchair or disabled in any way friendly for beekeepers. I think once you start looking at that kind of equipment, you've got to start thinking about, if I'm from quite a large scale, if I've got a dedicated honey room, are there any adaptations I can make to my honey room or honey house that will make me get access to the equipment easier, like raised floors? You have a certain area that's raised for your access, or a certain area that the equipment is higher up or lower down, or something. It's a tricky one, really, I suppose. But I suppose, it'd be great to see more extraction equipment that's of a manageable size. I mean, I don't see much equipment, for example, motorized extractors. Generally speaking, there's not many for sale that are full frames. They're all seem to be like 8 frame or 12 frame extractors, so quite large scale. So you end up with a massive, huge drum that you may not use all of it. So I suppose it's the manufacturers looking at finding, is there a need for the equipment, and do they need to fulfill it?
Do you use a traditional extractor?
Yeah, I've got one you have to hand crank. Yeah, it's hard work.
That was my question. Is it hand cranking? Because a lot of people who have disabilities that are physical, the hand crank is just not going to work for them. And like you said, the ones that are motorized are all 32 frame, 56 frame, much larger than a backyard beekeeper would need.
Yeah, that's the problem. I mean, you can buy from a couple of suppliers, you can buy like an adapter for your extractor that you can put a motorized unit on, which is great. But the problem is, it's like anything else from a hardware point of view, whether it be beekeeping or DIY, you pay a premium for that. So you end up paying twice. You can buy, I mean, I bought a really good pre-owned full frame extractor for what, £100. If I wanted to motorize it, I would have to pay another £200 just for the kit for it. So it kind of defeats the object. But the problem, as you just said, quite rightly so, once you start looking at motorized extractors, there's no halfway house. You either go large or absolutely huge. There's not even any small ones unless you go to your local beekeeper supply and say, okay, well, look, can you hook me up with this extractor and an electric add-on? And they'll go, yeah, that'd be like £500, please. And you go, well, for that I can get a 32 frame electric one. So it's I suppose and that's a very good point you've raised, actually. I suppose with what you just said, the problem being with being a beekeeper with a disability is, you may find that, and this isn't a massive negative, you may find with some aspects of your equipment, to get it how you want it to be, i.e. an extractor that suits you, that you find in a manual extractor that suits you, height and frame size, but it's just manual, you may find you have to spend more money in the short term to get it how you want, but in the long term it'll benefit you more unless your beekeeping needs exceed what you're doing.
Yes, it's very hard for I believe the upstart of a disabled beekeeper is going to be much higher than somebody who identifies as able body because of
Yeah, I think so.
the special equipment that they'll have to get.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's very true, but also I think I know this because I quite often watch a lot of videos from beekeepers all over the world, and the majority of them are either in the UK or the States. Um, but there is such a great second-hand market for equipment, and then when you get an idea of what you want, I think it's quite possible for you to get some of your equipment pre-owned, which I think is a good point for any beekeeper, but also for ones like myself and you, who have our own challenges to find the right equipment. So I suppose if you're looking at something quite specific, can you get, you know, part of it secondhand and get the expensive
Mhm.
bit new? I mean, the thing is as well, you always find a steady stream with beekeepers that they start off like me and you with a handful of hives, and then 2 years later, they find, oh, well, I've outgrown this equipment, I've outgrown that, and yeah, there's always a possibility of finding some equipment, but sometimes you maybe looking at like Facebook Marketplace or your local beekeeper club.
Who are some of the beekeepers that you enjoy watching on YouTube?
Ooh, it's quite a list actually. So I watch a lot of Bob Binney. He's really good.
Good
Um,
one.
yeah, David Burns is really cool because he's great from an educational point of view. He covers a lot of stuff that um, you can take bits from his videos on all levels of beekeeping. So whether you're a beekeeper who's been keeping a number of years or a new beekeeper, he puts it across to you in a way that you can take little aspects of that video away with you, whatever, and take it. Um, I also follow a beekeeper in France called Richard Knoll. I don't know if you've heard of him.
I'm not.
Yeah, he's really good. He's a Brit out in France. He does beekeeping in Brittany. So he's got the problem with the Asian hornets, which is quite scary because they've just been identified in the UK, which is a bit of a worry. But he's really good. One of my favourite beekeepers to watch is Jeff Horchaff. He's absolutely infectious. If you're having a bad day and you want to watch something that lifts your spirits, man, he's brilliant. He is just so good, and he does a lot of his videos are about catching swarms, doing extractions from houses, but also honey processing, which I suppose would be good for people who are looking at doing that because you get to see the scale of equipment that he uses. I think the monastery that he has bees at's got about 200 hives, and they've got a huge dedicated honey room. Trying to think actually. Let me have a quick look. Who else is on my news? Oh, there's a very popular um, British YouTube beekeeper called Black Mountain Honey. He's a guy in Wales, and he started well, he's on Facebook as well, but he does a lot of things from like a simplified, straightforward point of view. So it's very straightforward, very professional, and really helpful. There's the Yappy Bee Man. He does some really neat stuff.
I love Yappy.
Yeah, he's great. He does. I think one of his videos, I think it was last year, Justin. I think the one where he caught the swarm on top of his truck or something ridiculous. I think it was so many millions of views he got. It was just absolutely mad. Yappy's good. There's the Australian guy who's the bush bee man. Trying to think out who else. I'm sure there's one or two others I've missed, but there's a good few out there I'd absolutely recommend. The thing is with the internet and YouTube, there's a hell of a lot of people out there to watch, and it's easy to get a little bit overwhelmed. So I'd probably say if you're going to pick something to use as a bit of a learning tool online, from whatever's bad or you're having a bad day, Pick something that suits you, not something that you look at it and go, "Oh my goodness, I'm absolutely blown away. I'd like to do that, but I don't know how, or it's out of my depth." So, look at stuff that benefits you, not necessarily things that I suppose entice you, but you're maybe not at that level. Be realistic about things a little bit, I suppose. Because there's some beekeepers out there, like Bob Binney, he did some amazing stuff, and some of his videos are well, a lot of his videos are absolutely amazing, but some are a little bit over my head. Like there's one or two where he talks about the long term effects of oxalic vaping and stuff like that, and there's an awful lot of detail. So I suppose pick and choose who you want to watch and kind of stick with it because you're following their journey throughout what they're doing, and also you can kind of either mirror that or just take what you need from it. Really, I suppose.
Basically, your advice is to echo it is if you're a backyard beekeeper, try to watch a backyard beekeeper. Don't get lost in a commercial beekeeper, something like that.
Yeah, bang on. Yeah, I mean the danger is you kind of not marrying up with what you're looking at with what you want to do. And don't get me wrong, there's a whole bunch of beekeepers I follow on YouTube that do things above and beyond what I'm gonna ever do. But I treat it as kind of like entertainment in the sense that it's just escapism. You look at Bob Binney and he talks about his bees sometimes. Oh yes, I'm going to move these assets from here to here, or I'm going to put 50 hives on the back of this truck and take them down to another state or something to do some pollination. Um, so yeah, look at what suits you. I mean, there's definitely thousands of beekeepers out there who will they all have something to offer.
Well, I appreciate you, Jim, for being on the channel tonight. Is there anything else that you would like to share before we wrap it up?
I suppose, yeah. I mean, I suppose, I want to thank you for the time that you give me tonight. But I just want to say, if you're interested in doing beekeeping and you've got a disability, don't let it stop you. Um, look at what because it's a great mental stimulant. Look at what you want to do and get out of it. If you've never done it before, go and find somebody who's got an apiary. Go and see some bees. Borrow somebody's suit. Go and have a look at them and look at not just the bees, but the whole bigger picture, as you mentioned earlier on. Even if you end up joining a beekeeping club and just helping out to start with, you'll find it a very calming and enjoyable hobby and one that makes new friends, as we both know now, Justin.
It seems that the my mother always calls beekeepers a tribe, and she says that they are a tribe that will help people no matter what they need, and their outlook on life is completely different than somebody who's not a beekeeper.
Yeah, I'd agree with that 100% because I think you once you become a beekeeper or start to have more than a passing interest in it, you look at things from a different perspective and you look at the whole bigger picture for a start. But it's a community, and it's a global community. It's not just in your backyard. It's not just in your county or state or in your country. It's a global community. We're all trying to help because bees are in decline. In the UK here, the bees have been in their lowest. I think the lowest they've been for the last 30 or 40 years. I think we are fighting a battle. I don't know quite how bad things are in the States with regards to bees. I know you've got the challenge where you've got a lot more of a natural pest problem in the States with like small hive beetle and so on. Whereas in the UK, we've got Varroa and possibly we might end up, well, we have had Asian hornets in the southern part of the UK. So it's very much a community. Everyone's here to help you. And if you're having a bad day, it's raining outside, always reach out to somebody and they'll be there for you.
Follow someone funny on YouTube.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll just annoy your beekeeping friend on Facebook, whatever works for you.
All right. Well, I appreciate you being here and love talking to you. And it was very
Thank you.
good to get to know you more.
Absolutely. We'll have to stay in touch, and I look forward to helping you in the future again.
Yes, this has been Justin Ruger, host of Accessible Beekeeping and More, with our guest, Jim Anderson. Be different, be limitless, and continue beekeeping.